It's now my pleasure to invite Cassandra, is that correct? That's my next moment, my next opportunity, to invite Cassandra Farrington to come up on stage to do the keynote for 2019 ECF. Her bio is in the second screen. We're not going to read the bio. What I thought there couldn't be a better story to hear right now than how she and her team have ridden really a tidal wave. Now, you can either stay ahead of the tidal wave and ride it, or you can get crushed by it. So not only did she ride the tidal wave, but she did it so successfully that her competitors were left behind. So, Cassandra, if you will please share your story, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you all. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Sam, for that introduction. I am indeed Cassandra Farrington. I am the CEO and co-founder of Marijuana Business Daily, which in turn produces the Marijuana Business Conference and Expo, commonly known as MJ BizCon. And that's a distinction between Marijuana Business Daily and MJ BizCon that we'll get into in just a second. But I do want to take a moment to thank Sam for inviting me. Really appreciate the opportunity to come and share our case study with you. We have indeed been on quite a tear, and there have been some very unique circumstances that have both fueled our growth and that we have harnessed to ensure that that growth continues. If there's one thing that I know everybody in this room loves about a good event, it's the power to learn from each other and to connect with people who have walked similar roads. So I'm excited to share that with you and hope that you'll find some takeaways in here that will help you fuel your own growth. So it may actually surprise many of you to learn that by the time we launched MJ Biz Daily, Marijuana Business Daily, in 2001, the modern-day cannabis industry was already a teenager. And it started really back in 1996 in California, where a voter initiative, a ballot initiative, was passed, Proposition 215, and it came out of the AIDS epidemic, actually, out of the late 80s and early 90s, when both patients and caregivers were desperately seeking alternative medicines to alleviate symptoms for people at end-of-stage life from the AIDS epidemic. And there was this desperate sense from that population specifically that they wanted to not feel like criminals when they were accessing something that was really the only thing that they felt like was helping them. So Proposition 215 was passed by California voters, and shortly thereafter, we get our very first licensed dispensary in the United States, the San Francisco Buyers Club. And that launches the modern-day cannabis industry. Over the next several years, there are a series of states that continue down this path, mostly in the progressive West, but also a handful up in the Northeast, that are pursuing cannabis as medicine. They are expanding their qualifying conditions lists, which means that patients are able to access marijuana as medicine for a larger variety of ailments. And as that trend continues, we start to see the first federal attention on what's going on here. The first of those happened through the Ogden Memo, which was a memo from the Department of Justice that really clarified for the state attorneys general who were in these states where these medical marijuana programs were up and running and had been authorized by popular vote or by legislature in the states. And the Ogden Memo said that as a federal government, we stand by the stance that marijuana is a Schedule I drug, it is a dangerous substance, it should not be trafficked. However, it is not the intent of these laws to criminalize end-of-life patients or their caregivers. And you, state attorneys general, who are working hard every day to prioritize your own activities and to figure out what you need to be spending your time on, it's fair to let you know that it is not the intent necessarily to go after those people. So use that at your discretion. We also see for the first time the advent of federal legislation. And while it didn't pass for several years yet to come, the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment was the first step by the federal government. It was a budget rider amendment introduced in the House of Representatives at the federal government that would prevent the federal government from spending expenses, from spending resources, enforcing federal marijuana laws in states where people were acting legally under state laws. And so by 2011, this is what the map of the United States looks like with regard to medical marijuana. Like I said, largely the progressive West, some activity up there in the Northeast. And this was the situation that my business partner and I saw when we launched MJ Biz Daily and when we started thinking about that. And what we realized is that this is something that is actually emerging as a profession, as an industry, as things that people need to do in a similar way. Our background, both myself and my business partner, we come from a business-to-business media background, first and foremost. We are not events people by tradition, we are media people. And we were looking at this map, looking at what was happening. I live in Denver, so I was able to kind of see this all sort of emerging around us. And we thought, well, look, this is an industry where we don't know this plant. You'd actually be quite surprised at the backgrounds that my business partner and I come from to end up where we are today. But we don't know this plant at all, but we do know business information and business intelligence, and we have a specific skill set in creating business intelligence and actionable information for business people that helps them do their jobs better and run their businesses better. And we've launched into all kinds of markets we don't know. Why should this one be any different? So we looked at this, met all of our criteria for a launch. We decided, let's go try that. And that really was the start of Marijuana Business Daily. And Sam was up here just a moment ago talking about the 24/7, 365 platforms and how important it is to remain connected to your audience throughout the year. At its core, one of the reasons we have been as successful as we are is because that is what we are at our core. We are that 24/7, 365 platform that is out talking to and listening to our audience every single day of the business year. And because of that, we continue to maintain all of that connection to our audience throughout the year. It started with a website and a newsletter, lead gen, Marketing 101. Now, at the same time that we noticed that this market was really emerging, the federal government was really starting to notice that too. So there were some key ways in which that timing of that launch was not necessarily auspicious. Because of the Ogden memo and some of the nuances in it, several states implemented regulations over their markets, which honestly was a good thing in the long run. However, the immediate impact was that there were all kinds of small-scale, mom-and-pop type entrepreneurs who had come up out of the black market who simply couldn't survive that leap to a regulated, full-on, professional, hyper-regulated market. And so businesses were going under. In addition, federal enforcement started to ratchet up some. One of the most common things that we saw was the federal government threatening asset forfeiture against landlords who were leasing their properties to marijuana businesses. And so a lot of businesses were having to shutter their doors and getting kicked out of their retail, their dispensary space, or out of their cultivation space. So it was certainly an unsettled time for the industry. However, at the same time, we absolutely felt and could really sense this industry cohesion emerging, in part by what we were able to show to the industry itself. We were able, through Marijuana Business Daily, to hold a mirror up to the industry and say, hey, this is what you look like. This is what your colleagues and your peers look like. This is what they're doing. This is a professional and interesting space, and there really is a business opportunity here. In addition, the first two recreational ballot initiatives make the ballots in two states, Colorado and Washington State. So we looked at all that, looked at each other, my business partner and I, and said, we're hearing from our folks, from our audience, that the next thing that they need is a place to get together that is not a cannabis festival, that's not a consumer celebration type event for people who simply love the plant. They want a business environment where they can get together, understand what each other's challenges are, connect, network, grow, let the people in Denver meet the people out in Portland, Maine, and meet the people down in Los Angeles. That sort of thing really hadn't happened in any substantial way before. So, took a deep breath, didn't quite bet the farm. There were going to be paths forward, but we made a substantial investment for sure in launching what we were hoping was going to be a mildly successful first-year executive conference, 250 people. That was where we were going to be okay with the money. And that is the launch of what became Marijuana Business Daily. And we specifically set it up to include everybody, to bring in all different constituencies, and to make sure people understood that this was a neutral platform based on our journalism and media background, that this was going to be a neutral platform where all players could operate equally. And then, surprisingly, that was 2 days before that conference opened, those two ballot initiatives actually passed. And so instead of 250 people at this very unique, funky Masonic lodge in downtown Denver, because let me tell you, back in 2012, when you pick up the phone and say, do I have an event I want to put in your venue? You'd be shocked at how quickly everybody was so booked up. So sorry. So we did find space. We were able to pull that off, and we were able to put 400 people into that space, and it was a truly smashing success, coming right on the heels of the passage of those two amendments. So 2013, we're simply looking at building on that foundation and making sure that we both help the industry continue that momentum and keep up with it ourselves. Canada launched its regulated medical marijuana program in 2013. In Canada, rather than coming through the ballot box, federal legalization came through the courts, and it came at the national level right away. So in Canada, the federal government stepped up right away and said, this is not going to be a free-for-all. We are going to regulate this, so here we go. And so that created, in and of itself, very clear and directed business opportunities for entrepreneurs who wanted to work north of the border. On our side at Marijuana Business Daily, we continue to talk to our audience, understand what they need. At that point, that is benchmark data and forecasts and prognostications so people can build business plans and forecast their own futures based on what others in the industry were seeing, feeling, doing. We also launched the magazine, again, holding the mirror up to the industry and saying, this is what your colleagues and peers are doing. This is something that a real industry has, a print magazine. And that helps the industry continue to coalesce. August that year, we get a second memo from the Department of Justice, the Cole memo. And this one was a true launch moment for the industry, because whether it was intended to or not, the Cole memo became effectively the 8 commandments for how to do business more or less legally at the federal level within the cannabis industry. And it said that, yes, we reaffirm and commit to federal drug laws. Marijuana is a Schedule I drug. That has not changed. However, state attorneys general, really these are our 8 federal enforcement priorities, and they were very common sense things like don't let drugs fall in the hands of kids, don't traffic it across state lines, keep criminal enterprises out of the drug market. And they were things that the industry largely agreed with. And it became something of a green light, at least that's how the industry viewed it. And so when we had gone from that 400-person blowout event in Denver, we almost double our capacity. We move it to Seattle. We're in a racetrack this time, which is a step up from the 150-year-old Masonic Lodge. So we're in the racetrack, and we have room for 700 people. The Cole memo is issued in August, and within 3 weeks, we are completely sold out wall-to-wall, fire limit capacity, cannot take another person, and this is back in the days when it was still a very small, bootstrapped, everybody roll up your sleeves organization is what we're running, and I'm answering the phone for 6 weeks and telling people, I am so sorry, I can't take your money. And that is a gut-wrenching thing for a company that is really trying to grow and fund itself. And so that Seattle event, again, wall-to-wall, we end up maxing it out at 700 people, and we start looking for space that is much bigger. which ended up being the Rio in Las Vegas, was the first traditional conference facility that allowed us to come in, or any cannabis business conference to come in. And that was another game-changing moment for the industry, to see itself in traditional conference space and to start feeling themselves like this is a legitimate industry. Other key things that happen in 2014. Colorado becomes the first state to launch its recreational sales program for the first time in almost 100 years. Colorado completed the first legal cannabis transaction in this country. The Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment, which I mentioned earlier, actually passes and gets attached to the budget for the first time. So again, further limiting of the federal enforcement bite that could happen. We move the show, and moving the show also provides us a couple of really important opportunities to continue supporting the industry in different ways. The first was through this marijuana business crash course. We now had this core group of people who had been with us for a couple of years, and had been around the industry for a while, really knew what it was about, so the experts in the industry. And there was a flood of brand new people who were intrigued, who had started hearing about it in the mainstream media, who were on that cutting edge enough that they felt comfortable maybe looking into this, but they wanted to know what it was all about first. And so we created a funnel for those new people to really come on board and feel welcome at the very beginning, to understand the lingo, to understand the outlines and sectors of the industry, to meet a handful of experts one-on-one, so that when they launch into this larger conference, that they don't feel quite so alone, especially with a topic like marijuana, which certainly has its giggle factors associated with it. Believe me, I get it. The other thing that we do that year is that we, for the first time, are able to really marry together our independent and neutral journalism mission. And by the way, we are an AP-accredited news organization, so we have to remain unbiased, neutral, true journalism standards with support of the industry, because we definitely feel ourselves that we are part of that industry. And the number one business consideration for anybody doing business in the United States in the cannabis industry is to get federal legalization of the plant. If we don't do that, we are not ever going to have fully legitimate businesses, full access to banking, all of those things that make doing business in the cannabis industry difficult. But we can't select or choose or support any particular initiative under our journalism mission. So what we did was host a fundraiser and invest in producing that for a handful of industry partner associations, so that they themselves could benefit from that gathering of business people, really push forward that message that legalization is the number one business priority without us having to endorse or support any one particular organization. 2015, it really becomes about managing that rapid industry expansion. This is all about drinking from the fire hose, and that never, ever stops. We launch our spring event simply because, not simply because, but because we absolutely sensed this need that if we waited a full 12 months between events, that was like 2 or 3 years in any sort of mature industry. People had to be getting together more often than that to find vendors, to get the latest education, to understand the latest best practices. The Las Vegas Convention Center steps up and agrees that year to give us a future contract for dates, which again, very exciting, because we understand what that's going to mean when the industry can see itself in that very traditional expo space for the first time. And the show just continues to grow and grow and grow. That means for us, on the business side, we're having to completely redo our staff set and get people on board who either can grow into specialized skill sets very, very quickly, or who have those coming in the door. And that creates some tumult, no question. When you're growing that fast as a business person, as a business owner, you're constantly having to manage those sorts of needs of what did the business need last month, and what is it going to need in 2 months? And how do you bridge that gap? That also meant working more effectively with more sophisticated show partners and really understanding what that meant to run a large show because we could clearly see that's where this was now headed. 2016, of course, was also an election year, and anytime an election comes up, the cannabis industry is deeply affected by that. So as we approached the November 2016 election, it was clear that neither candidate Clinton nor candidate Trump had a strong personal opinion about cannabis. They were both, it felt pretty clear, ready to navigate the political waters whatever way there seemed like was going to be best at the moment. However, candidate Trump had in his group of people around him several very vocal anti-cannabis campaigners. And so there was a concern in the industry that if candidate Trump was elected, that would in fact impact the industry significantly. And sure enough, one of President-elect Trump's very first announcements was to announce his intention to nominate Jeff Sessions as the Attorney General of the United States. Jeff Sessions' most notable cannabis comment is that he thought that the KKK were pretty nice folks until he realized that they smoked pot. So that gives you an idea of kind of what we were facing in the industry. However, as concerning as all that was, in every other way, the 2016 election was an outsized success for the cannabis industry. 9 states passed ballot initiatives supporting or initializing or expanding their medical cannabis or recreational cannabis programs. And this was the environment into which people gathered at 2016 MJBizCon. It was a battle between these political influences and this industry influence. And what folks saw when they came to MJBizCon in 2016 were 11,000 business professionals looking to move this industry forward, who were in these new states, who had already invested significant time, energy, effort in moving this industry forward. The social crusaders who had become entrepreneurs who were determined not to let this industry roll backwards from a social justice standpoint. And the industry influences won. And whether it was Russia, whether it was immigration, there's no question that Jeff Sessions fell out of favor with President Trump reasonably quickly. And good for the whole industry, for my whole industry, the industry growth did continue through 2017, largely unimpeded by the federal government. We are able to move the show to the convention center for the first time. And again, it really truly was a game-changing moment when people walk into an expo floor and they start seeing double-decker booths and hanging signs and just the way that we all know a full-on large industry expo looks like. And the industry was able to imagine itself there and feel like they belonged in that sort of environment. We also expanded the industry give back program that we had been doing for a couple of years into a broader initiative. Because while legalization remains a key pillar of that and of everything that everybody in the industry is doing, we are also at a point by 2017 in this industry of having to look at what do we want this industry to look like in terms of diversity for female inclusion and for minority inclusion. If there is one actual, true, legitimate knock against the cannabis space, it is that it is a resource-intensive plant to grow. And there are huge sustainability issues within the cannabis industry. So what are we doing about that? How are we engaging in community involvement in communities that have been very hard hit by the drug war? There are a lot of ongoing questions from an advocacy standpoint in these ways and professional development that really matter to what the future of this industry looks like. And while legalization is not quite done yet, we can't wait. And so to look at these other issues, and so we start moving the conversation forward on those aspects as well and showcasing those organizations who are doing that sort of work. 2018, both California and Canada launched their recreational adult use medical programs. California itself being one of the largest economies in the world, Canada is rivaling it in terms of size. Those are two very large marketplaces that slingshot the industry forward again. Neither of which have gone out completely successfully. Not a huge surprise given if anybody has looked at the history of how these programs have rolled out state after state, but they're getting there, and they're getting there quickly. Multiple countries, multiple states continue to move forward on medical programs. There are now as many countries around the world who have medical marijuana programs as there are states in the United States. And more than 70% of the US population now lives in a state that has at least a medical marijuana program, and that has largely been accomplished through popular ballot initiative. So we as a nation have voted that cannabis prohibition, not working, we don't want to see that anymore, let's move forward. Because of that, this has absolutely become a billion-dollar industry. And while I should have thought to put it up as a question, as a polling question on the second screen, I won't. I will just say, I would not be surprised to know if at least 10% of you guys out here in this audience have some of your own personal investment funds in a cannabis stock somewhere. It has become the hottest growth sector of the stock market. And then at the end of 2018, lo and behold, the Farm Bill passes with a provision in there that includes hemp legalization, full hemp legalization. So for the first time, again, in almost a century, it is legal in this country to put a cannabis sativa plant in the ground, grow it to maturity, and harvest it for food, fiber, and flour, and for all of the byproducts of that plant. We also see further legalization activity. This is where this industry is today. Right in the United States, you can see that map is starting to fill in nicely. It is also completely filled in when it comes to hemp. And that's just going to keep going. So what does that mean for us? We have to continue to pace with those market demands. Right? We're continuing to grow the show and always looking for more space. It means that we have to continue to up-level what we are doing each and every day, leveraging those new technologies, those new marketing programs, connecting people in new and different ways. Because it is not just enough to have the top show in an industry. It has to be worthy of being the top show in the industry. And that is an ever-changing bar that we have to and you need to keep up with. We continue to strengthen our partnerships with many industry associations. We have brand new programs rolling out at MJ BizCon this year that we'll be announcing in the next couple of weeks that will really, truly bring together the entirety of the cannabis industry once again. We continue to expand our media offerings into areas that the industry is saying, this is what we need to hear, this is what we need to know, this is what we're interested in so we can move our own businesses forward and do our own jobs better. That involves hemp, that involves the international picture, and it involves investing in finance, which are the three top growth areas for the cannabis market. This is the growth that we have managed through over the last several years. And I'll save you guys the math. If straight line growth for these charts in 2019 is going to lead to 39,000 delegates and over 250,000 net square feet of paid exhibit space. And that is for a show that launched in 2012 as a small executive conference. So it has been a sea change of the way the business needs to operate over that time. That show growth is fueled by this industry growth. And that industry growth is happening globally. And it has been very exciting, and honestly, one of the things that I am proudest of is the role that MJ Biz Daily and MJ BizCon has played in supporting and expanding and making this possible. For us, we continue to grow. It is on us to continue to serve that marketplace in the ways that it is and the ways that it needs to be. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we do MJ BizCon as an offshoot of everything else that we do. All of these things over here that we do each and every day of the business year provides the rocket fuel for that show. And that is a huge difference, and that's the takeaway that I would love to leave you with. Whether you're an association, whether you're an independent show organizer, what's really important for everybody in this room as a show director and somebody who loves your show, make sure that everything else in your organization is rock solid strong and provides the industry with what it needs. Because if you're doing that, if everything else that your audience gets from your organization is exactly what it needs, then your show will also be unstoppable. Thank you.
I'm going to ask the first question, then we have a couple of mics here, 2 different mics, and we also have questions coming in from the second screen. You rode a tidal wave successfully. You helped make an industry with your show and your publication. I want to hear some, how many shows, regional shows, other shows in the United States, not internationally, in the United States, how many shows where you were part of a pack of how many?
Yep.
And how many are gone now and how many are left?
So actually not many of them are gone now. There are a handful that have folded or never quite launched successfully, but there have been quite a number that have launched. Many are niche or focused on an aspect of the industry. There are absolutely people and organizations, both on the trade side and on the association side, that have effectively picked up our playbook and ran with that, which is why I get back to it's not enough to have the top show. You have to be worthy of being the top show in the industry. But there's absolutely been significant competition that's emerged. Nothing attracts competition like success. And bring it on. It's what, if you're going to be in business, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you've got to be able to take that.
Okay, thank you. Any questions here, there? So you can enter your questions in the second screen. So now's the time. If you have any questions, please do. Here we go.
Oh, hi, Rick.
Really amazing story. Congratulations. I mean, really great things. Could you talk a little bit about the headwinds that you faced? Some of the big obstacles that you faced, had to overcome. Obviously, the court of public opinion's out there, right? Which kind of sways back and forth. But if you talk about that, that'd be helpful, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Doing business in the cannabis space, even as a media and events company, and by the way, we are not incorporated under our official business name is not anything to do with the M word or the C word. We have a parent company, and that's what we do all of our business under. However, all of our banks, all of our lawyers, all of our everybody fully understands what we do and how we do it. We are very transparent about that. We have to be, because the last thing we need is an unexpected shutdown of a bank or something like that. But there's no question that doing business in the cannabis industry is not a normalized business environment. And that is something that has affected us, just like it affects much of the rest of the industry. We don't have as many headwinds as some of the plant-touching companies, which I think is what a lot of people hear about in the cannabis space. But that is certainly a consideration. Other headwinds has indeed been the court of public opinion. When we were first looking for office space, as we were really growing quickly and needed to find a place to bring everybody together, we had 2 or 3 landlords say, "You've got to be kidding, I'm not renting to you." I made a joke earlier about the Masonic Lodge and the racetrack. It's things like that, right? Like, you have to prove and show that you are a legitimate organization before they're going to take you seriously. You can't just look the part. You have to show the actual organization.
Okay, I have another one. You started at the Masonic Lodge. You started 8-9 years ago with 700 people. And you had certain exhibitors, people who were paying you money to tabletops, that type of thing.
Right.
What kind of, how have you navigated coming up with the double decks and the hanging signs? Have the people you started with, have they matured or have they been left behind? Is there some resentment as far as getting off the horse that got you here?
That's a good question. Largely, they have come along and matured. It has been a thing for us to indeed show the industry, hey, this is what's possible. When we moved into the convention center, we, MJ Biz Daily, had the only double-decker booth. It was the very first one that a lot of people in the industry had ever seen. But they saw it that year, and let me tell you, the following year, there were 5 or 6. we had a hanging sign. The following year, there were 20 hanging signs. Right? We have had to bring along and train everything from our exhibitors to our show attendees. This is what you do at a show. This is how you take the best advantage of it. We have done a lot of education for our audience about how to take advantage of those things, of those opportunities that we ourselves are presenting. And the whole industry has benefited from that. The competitive shows have benefited from that as well, because once they see it at MJ BizCon, they start to imagine it much more effectively for everything else.
Leading by example, thank you. We do have a second screen question.
Yes, the question is, where do you see the biggest potential for international expansion?
So the question was, where do you see the biggest potential for international expansion? As a region, that's going to be Europe, probably. Individual countries, Germany is one of the most quickly emerging countries, while Canada certainly has a head start, and that's where many of the largest businesses in the cannabis industry are incorporated and spaced. It is a market that in and of itself is not likely to remain at the forefront as other countries and the United States continues to pursue federal legalization. We do expect a lot of that business to move back south of the border. So, but those companies absolutely have a head start, and whether they remain based in Canada or move internationally remains to be seen.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good job. Thank you very much. Okay, that was fascinating. I enjoyed hearing about how the sophistication of the partners, how as she grew, she realized she had to find new partners. That's many of the sponsors in this room. So interesting how it really has to be a teamwork. Increase the quality of the staff and change your partners to make sure you can handle this growth.